welcome to today's session. And today we're going to talk about how to promote student engagement through effective discussion and interactive group collaboration. My name is Megan Lingnos. I'm the Director of Learning Experience Design and Online Education at DTEI. I want to let you know that there are 3 sessions created for this topic. We already talked about a basic active learning strategies for almost our teaching last week. Today, we want to talk about specifically focus on effective discussion and student engagement. And this Thursday, we want to talk a little bit about how to use assessment tools to continue actively engage your students. So we hope to see you this Thursday. Today's agenda, we're gonna, at the beginning, just do a little bit of reflective type of exchange to think about how do we foster effective discussion for all different teaching modes. And then we're gonna have 4 UCI faculty join the panel to really share with us their plan, how they engage their student with active learning strategies and emerging technologies. And then we want to give you some best practice guidelines about how to encourage students to interact, because you can create a very active learning oriented class, but if student doesn't feel like they want to interact, that kind of defeat the purpose. So we want to give you some tips about how to encourage them. And finally, we'll have the breakout discussions. Each of the faculty members join the faculty panel will serve a breakout, and you can join different breakout discussion rooms to further discuss the topic. So that will be today's agenda. So I want to reveal our poll. So let me end the poll now. So you can actually see the results of the poll. In this group, we have all different kinds of choices. This is very interesting. We have diverse of choices. And I guess number 3 and number 4, so hybrid and synchronous remote are the most popular ones. But traditional classroom is just right 1 vote behind that, and some faculty said they don't know yet. And we have 1 faculty choose the rest of the mode. So that's just a quick reflect about how this group is going to do for fall quarter. I guess my question for you is that since you kind of have an idea about what kind of teaching mode you're going to use for fall 2021, what kind of discussion activities do you think you're going to implement that to foster that interaction? So I have a Google Doc created for you, and there's a link already shared in the discussion, the chat. So you can click on the chat and go to this particular document. So as you can see, the first column with all different modes. So there's a classroom in person or discussion session in person. Okay, how do you want to engage your students if it's live? And then how about asynchronous online? So use discussion board or synchronous using Zoom. What kind of discussion activities do you think will be good for that? And what kind of tools are you planning to use? And is there any challenges or concerns that you're really kind of not sure if this is gonna play well? So let's take some time to share our plans on this document, and we can talk about it. And I can see some faculty already have a plan about doing some sort of asynchronous online discussion. So this particular faculty will use Canvas discussion, will use Perusall and add discussion as a tools. That's great. Also, we have some faculty want to do synchronous Zoom session using Google Docs, and that is a great idea. In fact, what we're doing right now is exactly that. We're doing an asynchronous Zoom session. We use a synchronous Zoom session, and I use a Google Doc to help us collaborate together. And you can see multiple people are putting their inputs together as a way to collaborate this document. And, you can definitely use Google Doc in the classroom, in-person classroom. That is just a great tool. And then, let's look at the discussion activities. Some faculty were talking about inside the classroom, you can do breaking out reading text for finding main ideas and organization. That is a great idea. Since we're all together in the classroom, we can actually kind of do some sort of deep dive or some sort of reflective pause to think about what they have read before you start your lecture in the classroom. You can definitely use a Zoom chat and Poll Everywhere to do that. Yeah, Poll Everywhere is a great tool that can engage students synchronously with in-class student and also remote student. So asynchronous online discussion, you can do some sort of meet and greet, you can do some sort of introduce yourself kind of activity for them to start oriented the class. Discuss the current events, great. Discuss course FAQ is so important. If you have some students not gonna meet with you in person, it's kind of nice to have a place for them to ask questions, because most likely if one student has a question, a lot of other students may have the same question. So it's nice to just put it on the discussion board so everybody can see that. Mother's point is a great idea. We talked about synchronous Zoom session. You can do breakout rooms, definitely, great idea. So let's talk a little bit about the challenge and concerns. So we have some faculty said that, doing asynchronous online, haven't heard much about how to set it up yet. Oh, add discussion. That is a great point. We're going to have a group office hour tomorrow, and we're gonna do some demonstration about how to use add discussions. So if anybody, and anyone who doesn't know what that is, just kind of let you know that UCI recently purchased another online discussion board tool called Add Discussion. And this is so new, not a lot of faculty have been using it, but it is already integrated in Canvas. We're gonna show you some of the getting started kind of overview to help you get familiar with this tool. It is really nice. So now you have two different discussion tools to use. One will be Canvas discussion, one is Add Discussion. And another challenge faculty says students, student have to learn a new tool. Yeah, that's true. But in today's digital learning type of the era, we will have to constantly learning new tools, and hopefully, the newer tools will become more efficient and less learning curve for us to get familiar with. And then for synchronous Zoom session, the challenge could be engagement. Yeah, the student are not turning on their camera, but we cannot really force them due to the inclusive concern. But how do you continue to engage them without their camera on? That is a challenge. And Zoom fatigue, definitely, I personally can feel that as well. In the classroom, challenge could be students need to learn about text organization. I'm not sure what that means. Can anybody kind of help us understand? Oh, maybe the sentence is not finished yet. When reading a academic text. So when you say text organization, are you referring to more like a citation? Or you're talking about the ways ideas are organized? Ah, got you. Okay, yeah, that's definitely a that definitely is a practice for students to learn that skills. And especially, I think for international students, it's a learning curve for them. And I have a personal experience about that. So I'm hoping the faculty right here will continue share with us your thoughts, how you are going to implement discussion activities for fall. To engage your students. At the same time, what kind of tool you're gonna use, and what kind of challenge and concerns. And what I like about these kind of activities is that at the end of the workshop, for example, you have a document that could be a takeaway. So feel free to continue interact on this document, but I'm going to continue our discussion here. So I want to use like 1 minute to kind of summarize how do you create discussion related activities. So the first thing first, you really need to think about, why do I want to have a discussion? I have seen I have seen some faculty sometimes creating a discussion activity to create discussion activity, but there's not really clear purpose. So it is important that you kind of determine this, what do you want students to experience or gain, you know, in order throughout this activity. So the first thing first, you know, if you want the student, help them to reflect or deep dive into a topic, or you want to cultivate some sort of critical thinking, problem solving skills, or encourage peer interaction, if that is the purpose of the discussion activity you want to create, they are more about formative assessment. I call mini assignments to help students to, you know, engage and get into the learning process. However, if you want to create a discussion activity to really checking students' learning progress, see how they are learning, or try to assess students' understanding of a topic, or to evaluate students' learning performance. In that way, I will consider that as a more formative assessment, more like a big assignment. So this is very important for you to ask yourself, why do I want students to discuss? And then you can kind of determine, you know, which one. And then now here comes the activities. If you just want students to have a deep dive or reflect on the topic, or try to foster that critical thinking, problem solving skills, encouraging them to interact, you can do some sort of in-class discussion or pair activities, reading annotation, online discussion board, group case study, these kind of things to kind of help them to really enhance that learning experience. But if the discussion activity is really for evaluation, then you want to do some sort of check in their progress, you know, group problem solving, group projects for problem-based scenarios, or reading, lecture discussion, more like a formal, you know, to wrap out the topic, group projects or research projects. So this is a slide I hope that will be useful for you to really think about, why do I want to create a discussion? And then in that way, you can determine what kind of tools and strategy you're gonna use. And another thing I want to share with you, that if you want to create a discussion board, it is kind of nice to provide a discussion rubrics for your students so they understand your expectation, how you want them to discuss, and the quality of the discussion. And I'm not going to go over a lot of details, but you see there's some keywords highlighted in the red color. Those are the components you want to include that in your rubric. And here is a slide that you will be able to see all different samples, you know, about discussion rubrics. And on the right-hand side, there's a lot of information. How do you set it up on Canvas? So hopefully that is a useful information for you to get that set up for your course. And there's some guidelines about how to engage in effective class discussions. And I want to highlight the last two items. You want to model active listening, and you want to consider active learning. And those are very critical for the success of the discussion that you're engaging. And if you want to learn more information about these 6 guidelines, you can click on this link. This guideline is provided by Yale University, and you can learn more about prepare yourself to create that discussion culture for your class. Finally, I want to talk about digital citizenship, because a lot of the discussion that we're going to conduct for our class are going to be online. So how do you prepare your student to be a good digital citizenship and talk civil online? Is very important. There are 2 resources I want to provide it to you for on this slide. The first one is under this yellow link right here. My team put together a online remote learning Netiquette guide. So you can go through that and maybe grab some of the languages, put it on your syllabus to let your student know what your expectations are for their communication guidelines. At the same time, there's some tips and activity to help digital citizens engage with sympathy. And this becomes very crucial for especially for today's higher education, because we want to promote inclusive excellence. So these are some tips and activity to help you to engage that. Not just you provide inclusive teaching, and also allow your student to learn how to be more mindful in terms of inclusive excellence. So these are the tips. And this, if you click on this picture right here, it'll take you to an Amazon book. If you want to learn about how to foster your student become a good digital citizen, this is a very good book. I would highly recommend. And finally, these are some additional resources and readings. If you want to learn more about engaging students with discussion as part of active learning strategies, these are wonderful tools and articles for you to read further. So those are my really quick reflective kind of discussion to prepare your mind so we can actually be ready to hear about our faculty panel talk about implementing active learning. And today we're really honored to invite 4 UCI faculty from a variety of disciplines to really share with us how they engage their students in class. Let's give them a round of applause. And Bo Choi is going to be the panel moderator. So Bo, feel free to start, unmute your microphone and start the session.
Thank you so much, Megan. It was very informative to learn about how to effectively just, creating that area of discussion. And while Megan is helping me out pinning our 4 panel, I just want to introduce myself. Hi, everyone. My name is Bo Choi, instructional designer at DTI, and I'm so honored and pleased to have the 4 awesome faculty that some of you I worked with last year. I know we are all like, oh my gosh. But, I know that you guys were the exemplary faculty, have done so much great work, and would love to share their experiences using some of the tools that, in fact, we mentioned through that activities that Megan did during using Google Docs. So hopefully this panel will be very informative and for you to kind of get started or to even get an idea what your colleague has done to be active in their teaching and what tools they have used to do so. So hi, everyone. We have Professor David Cobb, Professor Max Aguilera, Professor Angela James, and Professor Kinda, who are here. All right, so what we could do is you guys could turn off your, unmute your microphone. And how we're gonna start with that, I did give them a question for you to prepare. So we're gonna actually go by, but everybody, how we're gonna start the panel is, I would like to ask yourself to introduce yourself and share your favorite technology that you have delivered using for active learning, or would like to deliver active learnings in a coming quarter. So we could start with David.
Great. Hello. Thank you for having me so much. Thanks for the invitation, Megan and Bo. My name is David Kopp. I'm an assistant professor of teaching in mechanical and aerospace engineering. And I teach a number of project and laboratory courses that sort of inherently have a lot of hands-on active learning. But my favorite technology to use within the classroom for active learning definitely has to be Poll Everywhere, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about later today.
All right. Okay. Thank you, David. How about Max?
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Bo and Megan, for the invitation. And I'm Max. I started last year, probably one of the best times to start teaching here at UCI. I'm in the chemistry department. I'm an inorganic chemist, so I teach the upper division inorganic chemistry, which is problem solving heavy. So one of the tools, one of my favorite tools is the Google Jamboard, which I'll talk about later, which is sort of a more beefed up version of the Google Doc sharing documents, and was a way that I found that facilitated smaller group discussions in a class of about 130 students during the fall last year.
Thanks, Max. How about Angela?
Hello, I'm Angela Jenks. I'm an associate professor of teaching in the Department of Anthropology and the Social Sciences. I teach a lot of reading heavy courses. So my favorite tool that I've been using is Perusal, which I will talk a little bit more about, but I've used it in everything from small graduate seminars up to 300-person student undergraduate lectures. And I've found it to be wonderful in all of those courses.
Thanks, Angela. Lastly, Kingda.
Hi, I'm Chingda. I'm a PhD student here, and I was teaching an intro programming course for the biomedical engineering department over the summer. So I was telling Bo and Megan before that I actually don't feel like I did a good job engaging the students. So I don't have a favorite tool because it didn't really work. However, I do have some experience using EdDiscussion. I think that's why they asked me to come here and talk about it.
Yeah. And thank you so much, Kinda. Yeah, I mean, I feel like, I mean, probably everybody knows EdDiscussion is a pretty new tool. And we have invited Kinda because he was the first first faculty that I know have jumped in to learn. So, you know, I think every time when we're learning a new technology, we do learn from our, like, you know, not every first time is always perfect. And so that's why I thought inviting Kinda will be actually good to hear, because now everybody, a lot of you actually I saw in the Google Doc never heard of it. So that's something that could be another step for you to get to know what tools and what's the pitfall for those tools to use in that. So, well, thank you so much for everyone to come. So I know all of you have shared some of your favorites, some of the tools that you have used in your class. So now I'm gonna actually ask a question to Max. So Max, I know you have shared about Google Jamboard, and I know it's a great tool, and we all UCI faculty, staff, and students have access to Google Drive, which Google Jamboard is part of. So that's something that I would love to hear from you about. What is your success story about using it? And then also, I know that you have used a Canvas discussion as well. So if you could kind of share with us about a little bit, and also what is your plan for next fall?
All right, yeah, and maybe it might be easier if I share my screen now. Yeah, so what I'm, like what I mentioned, I was teaching an upper division inorganic chemistry course last year, 130 junior and senior students. And there are several activities that I implemented. Really, the main goal was to get by, my first quarter of teaching. But I tried different activities to really engage students asynchronously and also in synchronous sessions in the class. So I'll talk about two of those tools that I used, which Bo mentioned. So the first one was using Canvas discussion as sort of a peer review platform. So I was trying to reimagine, if we have a journal peer review process where reviewers can sort of write their first views and first reviews, and then they can discuss, what they think about the article and basically come up with a sort of publication decision at the end. So I picked 3 seminal papers in inorganic chemistry. And then sort of I wrote an instruction. Imagine you're a peer reviewer in the 1960s and an editor sent you this journal article for review. What do you think about it? And then basically use the Canvas discussion platform so that once they input, they wrote their initial reviews, they can discuss and basically talk about what are the good and the not so good aspects of the papers. And these are big papers and are seminal papers. And also basically I wanted to teach them this idea that the scientific literature is not a be all end all, and that there will always still be things that can be improved and that can be challenged, especially with their current views now. This worked especially well because most of the students are already part of research groups and are doing their honors thesis, for example, and so they're really into the literature as well. So that was one of the feedback that I got after the class, that they were able to basically sort of reevaluate how they read papers. And for the scoring, it's basically their initial response and then 2 other comments to students' responses. So they won't be able to see the other student responses until they put in their first response. There were 3 journal review discussion board assignments spaced 2 weeks, about 2 to 3 weeks apart during the quarter. So these are some of the things that if you want to implement it that are quite important. So if you create this Canvas discussion activity, here are some of the checklists. And what I did so that they will have smaller group discussions. So I made groups of at least 6 to 7 students. And you can do that by using the people tab and then creating a group set for the activity, which probably most of you already have tried. But that made it easier to basically make the discussion more engaging. And then at least, and from what I've seen, there were pretty good discussions, and basically some of them started really tackling the articles and then pointed out really what are the weak and strong points of the review articles. 5 points for the initial post and 5 points for the 2 responses. This was 10% of their final grade. And here are some of the criteria that I used, which is basically mainly from some of the links that Megan posted earlier. So sort of like the University of Central Florida rubric for online discussion, which I found that it worked, but that's something that I'm trying to sort of reconfigure for this incoming quarter to make it more focused towards this specific peer review discussion activity. One of the main challenges was that it was hard to check the response, to basically grade and give feedback for the responses, because each activity had 130 students times 3, at least 390 posts that me and 3 other TAs went through. So that was a little bit challenging. So that took time. So the feedback was a little bit delayed. So what I'm planning to do for this incoming full quarter is to make this into only one activity and make sure that the TAs are briefed well, and that we basically divide the checking of the responses, because that was really one of the really challenging aspect of this activity. But towards the end, when I saw the student evaluations, this was something that the students were able to appreciate, because at least they can combine everything that they learned thus far, combining their concept that they learned in inorganic chemistry, in general chemistry, in organic chemistry, to tackle these big papers that were presented to them. The other tool which is my favorite tool, was Jamboard. So like what I mentioned, there's a lot of problem solving activities in the course, and most of them would require to draw chemical compounds and structures, which was hard to do, for example, especially for a big class in the Zoom whiteboard activities. So I found Jamboard, tested it, and what worked well was that when you set up Jamboard, you can set up to 20 pages. And what happened, and what I did was basically break the students into 20 groups. And one of my favorite aspects in Jamboard is that I can keep it open during the synchronous Zoom session. It's very easy to go from one page to another. So I can basically go from group 1 to group 20 in less than 5 minutes. And what I did was so that I can give feedback, I use the sticky notes function to basically put it where the questions, basically sort of tips and clues on how they can tackle the problem. Students were able to find it relatively easy to use their tablets to write structures similar to this sample page. And then me and the 3 TAs that I had during the course, we also jumped from one breakout group to another, which worked well. It's not the best experience, because it would take at least 2 to 3 minutes per group. So maybe in person this will be easier, because I'm planning to implement it in with the in-person groups, and that it's easier to at least go from one discussion group to another. But this is a good platform so that for everyone to have input, have actual discussion, basically students teaching one another and trying to figure out these problems. Most of the problems are multiple step problems, and they were able to work through those. After the session, I took out their editing capabilities, but I saw students still going back and reviewing the questions. One of the issues that we had was that you can only have 60 users at a time. So what happened was each group can only have 2 to 3 members who can actively use the board. Some students were not actively participating in the beginning. What I did was to basically assign bonus points for their quizzes. For the top 2 groups who get the highest points, we'll have an additional points for the exam, and then for the long quizzes, and then they would put their names of whoever participated. So that increased the participation by a lot. Some other things to consider is that students using non-UCI accounts or non-UCI emails will not be able to join in. So just if you plan to use Jamboard, just make sure that everyone is using their UCI emails. Yeah, for like what I mentioned for the incoming quarter, I'm planning on using this platform and grouping students based by proximity, so they don't have to move around during the class. I think it might still be, I still have to check out the classroom that I'll be using, but if they can move around their their seats, this is a good platform so that they can still write onto something while maintaining a safe distance from one another. And then basically now we'll have one assigned note taker so that there won't be a lot of students accessing the Jamboards all at the same time.
Wow, thanks.
All right.
Wow, this is great. Just kind of by looking at your discussion board, the one activities that comes out is like you have to pretend role play. They have to pretend that they are the reviewer of the actual article. And that's a kind of a fun way to kind of engage things. But, it's great to see that you are using a Canvas discussion, something that that's a you don't have to use too fancy tools to do so. It's something that it can be done. Start from something you're familiar with, and that's great. And then you are building up the rubric. But looking at your Jamboard, I mean, I know that Jamboard is always kind of fun to use, but there are some limitation. And in fact, Irene kind of did talk about 300 students each jam the Jamboard, which is kind of a little bit, but it is true. So there is some of the challenges there, but it's good to know. And how Max shared about what he did to kind of make sure that this thing works well, and the challenges that tweaking that to make sure that students have a good access, which also continue using it in a fall to really help students, also to help students to be to have that distance. So that's great to hear. Well, thank you so much, Max, for sharing that. Well, now I wanted to actually now ask Angela. So Angela, I know you are Perusall. I know I met you last time during one of the workshops. You talked about Perusall, and actually that was my first time hearing about Perusall, and I just loved it. So what I would like to ask you is share your experience about overall Perusall the experience, and also how did you use Perusall to really engage students with the content?
Great. Thank you so much for having me here. I just put in the chat a link to a demo course that I have set up in Perusall if you want to just see what it looks like, particularly from like a student perspective. If you've already used it or you have an account, you can just enroll in a course with that code that's listed there. I set up the demo course last summer, so some of the comments are old because that's mostly when people were doing it, but the course is still open and available. So I've been using Perusall for about 5 years. It is a collective annotation platform. So you can input content. I usually do it with PDFs of articles, and students can then add their own comments to it. I have also used Hypothesis, which is one of the other main platforms. I used that before I switched to Perusall, and I had a lot of trouble. Just Hypothesis was very complicated doing PDFs. I think that they have updated that system now, but I have now stuck with Perusall and I've continued on with it. Perusall also has an option where students can purchase e-textbooks through the system. I haven't used that because I mostly use PDFs, but that's available. You can also use video and have students comment on video. And as of this spring, podcasts. So students can add comments to certain time marks in a podcast. So when I use it, I upload PDFs of articles that I would assign to students into Perusall, and I require them to add annotations. I usually ask them to add something like 5 comments per document. These can be original comments or they can be responses to somebody else. I split students in large classes into groups, and Perusall has a way that they can automatically split into groups. I usually do about groups of 10. So in a 300-person class, students are not seeing 299 other people's comments. They just see the comments of the people in their group. You can either have Perusall do that automatically, or you can do it manually. So sometimes I have split them manually to correspond to, say, groups in a Canvas discussion, so that they are interacting in both platforms with the same students, fellow students throughout the quarter. I also use the automatic grading system, but I use it, you can use kind of settings that Perusall has automatically set up to grade their comments, and that will then synchronize with Canvas and send over to the Canvas gradebook. Or you can manually adjust the settings. And I have done that to largely set it up so that it is credit or no credit. So students get full credit for just seriously engaging in it. It's okay if they're wrong. It's okay if they're incorrect. In fact, one of the great benefits is that I get to see where they don't understand things. So I don't want them to feel penalized for that. I don't want them to be scared to make mistakes. And I want them to engage with the reading seriously and not be trying to game the system, the grading system. So I have essentially played with the settings for a long time or initially, and then I copied them over to every class so that students basically get credit for good faith engagement with the readings. So some of the benefits of it, I think that the single most useful thing I've done is add my own comments to the reading. So essentially, so I teach anthropology. I have very large classes that will have like 5 anthropology majors and 200 people who have never taken an anthropology class before and aren't sure what that means. And so students come in with very different kind of understandings of the social sciences. Many are non-majors. Many have never read, an article in an anthropology journal before. And so I use my comments to really walk them through the reading. So this can be something that, like somebody was commenting in the Google Doc just now at the beginning of this session, how to help students understand the structure of an article. I use my comments to do that. And so I'll point out here in this section, the author will do this. And here you see the author summarizing their main argument. And I'll highlight parts of the article for them. Pay attention to this part, because this is where the author is explaining everything they're going to do in the rest of this article. And they're laying out an outline for you. That has been really helpful to just kind of walk students through, and they're essentially reading the article with me as I am talking to them about these parts of the article. It's also been really helpful to add questions into the document. So I'll add questions. How does this part of the article relate to this thing that we talked about 2 weeks ago? Who can define this term for us? And then the anthro majors are all really excited to come in and define a term that the other students may not have heard of. Can you think of an example of this phenomenon? The questions are helpful because they give students a place to start with their own annotations. When I started doing this and we tell them add comments, they didn't know what to say. It's like, well, what am I supposed to think? And they were so caught up in trying to have a correct answer to something. And that's not the point of reading it. That having my comments there and my questions gives them a place to start. So they can go through and just answer my questions, just respond to the things that I put in. And the more we do it throughout a quarter, the more comfortable they come. Eventually, they're super comfortable just adding all sorts of comments and random thoughts to the article as they're reading it. But at first, many of them have been anxious about that. My comments also help prevent them from an issue that I've had in Canvas discussion boards, where everybody waits until they see what someone else has commented before they add their own comments. Because they can just get started by responding to me, we get earlier comments. Those comments can be copied over from quarter to quarter also, which is very helpful. So if you use the same article in the next class, the next time you teach a class, you just copy it over and all of your comments copy over with it. So I only ever had to do that once per article. I don't have to reproduce it every quarter. In large classes, I'm not able to read every comment. I can barely even see them. It's overwhelming to look at the screen. And I'm happy to show, especially in the breakout groups, if people want to see what that looks like. But there is a tool called the Confusion Report that particularly highlights questions students are asking, but also places where there is a lot of discussion in the text. And that has been very helpful for me to just kind of skim through and see what they're talking about, what is standing out to them, places where the conversation has maybe gone off the rails a little bit, which happens. And then I know what to do for the class session. So I often, rather than discussing parts of the reading that were uninteresting to them or unnotable, or they're just fine with, I can do that in my comments there, the kind of basics of the article. We can then focus on this place where everyone is misinterpreting this part of the argument, or they're having a debate about what the author really means about something. That's what we can focus on during class. I would say that when I first started using it, I was surprised by student comments, by the depth of student comments, to be able to see what they're actually thinking while they're reading something. They had so many more thoughts and reflections, and important reflections, than was ever evident to me when I taught these same things. And then we discussed it in person in class, where we would have like a couple people share a couple things, maybe respond to my questions. But there's much more depth, and I can see kind of their level of understanding much more clearly in Perusall. I think the informality is also helpful. So Perusall allows you can add links, you can add GIFs, which a lot of students will start doing to respond to each other's comments. There's a kind of camaraderie that I think eventually can start to develop. And it makes reading fun, and it's more fun and less isolating than it might have been otherwise, to kind of add your little images and pictures and links to other resources. Sometimes they add. The cautions, I think there's three main cautions. The one is that the integration between Perusall and the Canvas gradebook is really finicky and is kind of annoying. And I last used it in fall 2020, so I'm going to use it again this fall, and maybe it's improved, but that's a little finicky. I think it's important to anticipate and have a plan for inappropriate comments. And this is true in a lot of active learning when students are talking to each other. Being aware of what they are saying to each other and possibilities for inappropriate comments, for bullying, for all sorts of other issues is a really important one to anticipate. So I teach anthropology. I teach a lot about race and racism. I teach about gender, structural inequity. It has not been a frequent issue, but it has been an issue that students post comments that are racist. Somebody posted a white supremacist symbol in one of the online learning things I was doing. These things come up, and in very large classes, it is hard to monitor every single comment that comes in. I ask TAs to do that. I try to do it myself. Perusall will flag some comments, and it has a special AI that works to some extent. It will flag some terms, but then sometimes the terminology is off. It flagged in a class on gender every use of the word vagina, but no other anatomical term. That was the only one, but all of those got censored out. And students were genuinely, we were discussing, like the whole piece was about like sex and gender and these categories, and like there were anatomical terms used. So sometimes the automatic flagging is a little off. Students can flag comments themselves. There's the possibility of using, of having students post anonymously, and I do not use that in my classes, because once you get into anonymous comments, you've all seen anonymous comments on the internet. There are these, we get more of these issues. So I make sure that every comment is publicly tied to students' names. And that probably does structure the conversation in particular ways that may eliminate some kind of freedom students have to post less popular comments. But the safety concerns have kind of outweighed that for me. So balancing that has been a challenge. That will depend on the kinds of content you're teaching, how you're using it. But in my classes in the social sciences, that has been an issue. The other caution I would have is about the amount of surveillance that's involved in students, the uses of student data, privacy questions. This is true for all educational technology. In Perusall, it's especially true for the grading feature. So it tracks things like students' active reading time, which, okay, unless you have students who prefer to like print materials, read it offline, and then come back in and add their comments. And now they're being docked in the grading because of that. So just thinking about the way that some of these tools might be also creating inaccessibilities, I think is important too. I haven't had so much of an issue because I have just set the grading to not pay attention to those kinds of things, and to just basically give credit to everybody who has engaged. How to deal with bullying comments, bullying or racist comments. It might be a little outside of this. I don't deal with them any differently in Perusall than I do in Canvas discussions or when they're just verbally given in class. It comes up in multiple formats. It's just how you track and respond to it. I usually, there's different levels depending on what the comments are. There are discussions that I shut down immediately. In Perusall, instructors have the option to delete comments, and I have screenshotted and deleted comments immediately so that other students can't see them. I will follow up with a student who posts something. Sometimes there are things that they just don't know something. So I'll follow up with them individually. I will also sometimes check in with other students who may have been exposed to particular comments to see how they are doing, if they are okay, what I can do to support them. Eventually, I mean, if it's serious enough, it's a student conduct issue and it moves through the student conduct chains at UCI. That has been rare. It's been much more kind of monitoring and deleting comments and having one-on-one conversations with students, or in a live class discussion. There's terminology that we don't use. We're not questioning people's humanity. Like, there are debates we are not having in this class. And so it's just having a firm boundary there.
Yeah, thanks, Angela. I think we have a more question. I'm pretty sure we're gonna have, but as we're gonna be having a breakout session after this workshop. So please visit and ask a lot of questions, and a lot of our panelists have probably prepared a lot of things to share with you, and because the panel time is kind of limited. So, well, thank you so much, Angela. I mean, just kind of looking at, just hearing you sharing, I mean, wow, 5 years of Perusall. It's like, I thought Perusall was just last year, but it's been a pretty long time. But I'm so glad to have a faculty who's so expert on this thing to share your practice and how things, tips and tricks to kind of get by with it. Love to hear about that accessibility part, how, kind of tracking how long they spend, but some students might not be using a Perusall to read it whole. They could download that too. So that's really good to know. Love the fact that you are literally giving a guided question and comments to really help students. And some students need that help, and then they could go take them to further reflecting on the content. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I bet a lot of faculty has questions regarding on it, and I'm going to reserve that for the breakout session. Now, I'm going to ask Kinda about a discussion. I know it's something that we have all, it is a new tool. In fact, Ed Discussion is something that it's UCI start implementing beginning of June. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Piazza. Piazza was the one that was available before, and Ed Discussion is a replacement of that Piazza tool that integrated to Canvas side. So now I would like to ask Kinda, and then just share your experience regarding on Ed Discussion. But before I ask you, I want to ask you, when you thought of Ed Discussion, why did you choose Ed Discussion that you wanted to utilize to engage students? And also, what were the pitfall and then lesson learned, and what's your plan for in the fall?
Okay, thank you. So the main draw for Ed Discussion for me was that I heard you can post anonymously, but the instructor and TAs will still be able to see who posted. So you get the advantage of students being able to ask, quote unquote, dumb questions or questions where they don't want, other people to know. And you can also give answers in that anonymous way, so that if you make a mistake, the only person that knows it's you is the instructor. And you get around the fact of all the downsides of anonymity, because they're still accountable for what they say, just not by the other students. So that was the main reason I used it, and that was very useful back with the old EEE discussion boards that had that functionality. I don't know if it's been added on the Canvas discussion board now. This like the pseudo-anonymous features. So that's why I chose it. And also they do have an ability to have you post code and have the code run inside a discussion. But unfortunately, I was teaching MATLAB and they specifically didn't have that. They have like 8 other languages, but not what I needed. But if that's something that is specific to you, then can be very nice and useful. So for my specific case, I think it's very biased because I had a class of only 15 people, and it ended up with 15 people, it ended up easier just to email everyone and have everyone email each other, and it wasn't quite overloading. And we had about, the usual like 10-20% of the students that were engaging in group activities and stuff like that. When you have a class of 300, then you have a discussion. When you have a class of 15 and you have 10% or 20% of people, that's just 2 people talking to each other.
That's great. One thing that I wanted to mention, yeah, Canvas discussion do not have anonymous posting. So whoever posts, you know who posted, and students will know who posted each other. It's mainly because the grading attached to it. So that's it. And an ed discussion does allow, very similar to Piazza, but yeah, it's pretty new tool. So it's really good to know some of the, it integrates with a lot of different coding. If you're, it's computer science or any discipline that has a coding could be, but we know that now with the Kingda, MATLAB is not there. So that's something to kind of know about. But thank you so much, Kingda. And please go visit Kingda's breakout to see how the ed discussion looks like. But that's about the ed discussion. Now, last but not the least, David, I would like to, I know, Poll Everywhere. And I know we were so excited to hear Poll Everywhere is now available to everybody UCI. And before it was like by the license, limited license. So just one question. I know it's very excited and to share. How does Poll Everywhere support active learning, and how did you use it in your class?
Sure. Yeah, so I really like Poll Everywhere because it's one technology, one application that I can use for multiple activities. So to give you some examples, I'll use it for multiple choice warm-up questions at the beginning of class. I use it for sending a survey to students before the class even begins, asking things like, what time do you prefer office hours? They can rank preferences, or, what time zone are you in? Are you able to attend synchronously? So I can get all this data through this one interface on Poll Everywhere. And the other nice thing I'll say up front is that it works the same for students, whether they're in the classroom or attending virtually. So it will work for no matter what mode of teaching you're using. And the other things I think I'll show you with just a quick demo here. It'll make more sense as you're looking at it. Okay, so this is the Poll Everywhere website. And there we go. Another thing that I really like about it is that it can integrate pretty seamlessly with some of your other workflow. So for instance, down at the bottom of their website, they have these desktop apps. You can embed it directly into PowerPoint slides, Keynote slides, and your Slack channel, etc. So for instance, I like to give class with PowerPoint slides and I write on the slides as I go. I can actually embed these polls directly into the PowerPoint. And so within PowerPoint, I don't even have to leave PowerPoint. I can poll the class and we can have a group discussion as we go along. So those are really nice. It's sort of a seamless way to deliver your class. But if you go to activities here, another thing I really like is that you can group activities and then put them into folders. So for instance, I have a bunch of different activities for the different courses I teach. And then something you can do is you can actually select an entire folder and you can duplicate it. And so if you're teaching the class again next year, you can duplicate it. It will wipe out all of the responses in the duplicated questions. And you have a baseline of, in this case, 44 items that you can go ahead and use. So you don't have to recreate these each time you want to use the activities. So anyway, these are the groups and the different folders I was mentioning that you couldn't see. So you can actually duplicate these and reuse the questions over and over again. But let's go ahead and do one activity here. And like I mentioned, you can do a bunch of different types of activities. So I use multiple choice all the time for like warm-up questions, but there's a lot of other things you can use. The clickable image is kind of nice if you want to provide, like, for instance, how are students feeling today? They can click on a smiley face. You can have more open-ended things or word clouds. Something I like, because I write a lot of equations and add images as well, is that you can actually embed images or LaTeX equations directly into your options here. So if I say, go ahead, please describe yourself in one word, and let's maybe go ahead and do a word cloud. I can assign it to a group. For now, I'll just do default. And that's how easy it is to create. And so at this point, this is the view that I have. There's a number of options you can do to configure. So how can people respond? When I make it active, you can actually go to this website and respond there, or you can text, because I've selected these two options. You can also have some restrictions, right? So you can force people to register. So basically give a screen name. I'm going to go ahead and do this one with everyone and make it completely anonymous. And they even warn you that you'll lose all identifying information. You can schedule it to be asynchronous. So this could be up and students could be taking it anytime they're available, or you could do it live in class, sort of up to you. And then there are some moderation features as well. So for instance, you can filter things like profanity. I honestly haven't tried these to know how well they work, but there are some features there. One nice thing you can do is you can test it. So you can actually activate it and try it yourself to see what it looks like. And so let's go ahead and do this one. So I'm going to go ahead and activate this and present it. And so if you wouldn't mind either going to the URL or texting, go ahead and please describe yourself in one word. And this should be a word cloud. So think of one word. It could be an adjective, could be a noun. Like if you really like running, you could type in runner, but go ahead and describe yourself in one word. And what I really like about all of these live polls is that you get the real-time feedback. So students, as they're filling this out, maybe they're answering multiple choice questions, they can see the percentage of students choosing each answer. So while they're isolated at home, they're still getting to see what their peers are thinking about the question. We can have a discussion based on, how people are replying. And I think that helps them feel a little bit more engaged. So this is one example, just using a word cloud. And it will be updating in real time as people reply. And by the way, since I made it anonymous, you see the sort of anonymous hat up here, letting everyone know, feel free to say whatever you like. This is anonymous. That's probably good. Thank you for participating in that. Go ahead and stop sharing. So those are the main things that I really like about it. And yeah, I've used it in a lot of different ways. I'm happy to talk more in the breakout rooms.
Thanks, David. It was fun. Hey, I actually prepare one of the Poll Everywhere activity, and I don't have to do that. Well, thank you so much, David, for showing, demonstrating, and showing how Poll Everywhere works. And one thing that I wanted to emphasize to everybody is that if you're teaching that has to accommodate with the student through going through Zoom and in person, Poll Everywhere will be, Zoom poll is only for those who are in online. So, or you have to ask in-person students all log into Zoom. But Poll Everywhere, just the link, they'll log in and they could join. So it's good. We wanted to encourage a lot of faculty to utilize Poll Everywhere. And, with that word cloud, it's good to kind of see how students are thinking and really engage with the student. Thank you so much. So now, what I would like to ask, this is a last question to every panel here. If you could recommend or advise one things to be mindful of, or something to try, or anything one thing that you think of for faculty to plan to make their course to be active or more active, what would that be? We could ask now on. Let me start with the opposite, David.
Sure. I would say one thing is to be consistent. So if you're going to plan active activities, maybe even scheduling a specific time, like the last 20 minutes of every Thursday class, we're going to do some kind of group activity. Make it consistent and make it something that students can count on so they can prepare and sort of come engaged and ready to go, especially when they're in this, space of all different kinds of modes and they're going all over the place. So being consistent will help them, I think, to engage in the activities that we're doing. Let's see. Yeah, I guess also up front, even if you're not going to be consistent, just telling them when are the opportunities to actively participate and how can they do it. Regular communication, as we've all seen over the last year, is really helpful. So that's my recommendation.
Yeah, consistency and communication. That's great. Kingda?
Yeah, to tag on to that, I made the mistake of just telling them to contact each other without giving them like a platform, because I didn't want to. So in the previous class, there was something like use of Discord or Slack and stuff like that. But then I thought that they either had to go make a new account, or their account is also attached to all this other things that they would do. They probably don't want to see. They probably don't want me to see that they've started a video game on Discord or something like that. So I decided I'll leave it to you guys to sort it out. And that, I mean, if I heard David's advice before, I would have known. You need to really set up all of this, because when you leave it to the students, some of the students will get it right, but some of the students will just get left behind. And then I talked to them, 2 weeks later, they're like, oh yeah, I was never able to talk to my group members because we never exchanged for contact information. And I was like, oh no. So not having expectations on that front is going to be helpful.
Yeah, very important, very important. Thank you so much, Kingda. Angela?
So my advice is similar that I was going to say, which is to teach students how to do active learning. That I remember being in school and learning like how to take notes or different styles of taking notes, but I never learned how to participate in a discussion. I never learned how to communicate with group members, how to organize our time for a group project. That consider that how to annotate a reading was not something I learned until grad school. That students may need both structure, but also just they need to learn how to do this kind of learning. For many of them, it will be unfamiliar.
Thank you. Lastly, Max.
Yeah, I guess for me, it's running a low stakes activity for a new tool that the students are going to use, because that's how we learned that we cannot have more than 60 students access Jamboard. And basically that activity was just more of a like introduce yourself activity, and then so that they can doodle and test it before doing the actual problems and so on. And I think that for me especially, being an experimentalist, that's the first experiment that we ran, and that's how we learned from it, and basically being flexible as well, and learning how to adjust on the fly during the actual classes.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you so much. It kind of all comes down to how to teach students to be active, either the concept wise and how to, but also using technology itself. So, we always encourage our faculty, do the practice run first and see. But that's great, low stake, that's good. Well, I want you to say thank you so much, all four of you being here, sharing your very condensed and exciting and all this full experience using, being active in your class. And I'm pretty sure all our faculty here who heard it, they really appreciate your experience and they would love to be in your breakout room. So I would like to ask everybody to give applause to our panelists here. Thank you so much for coming. All right, so I'm gonna actually start my screen here. So as I mentioned, I did prepare for but I'm gonna actually pass that on because David actually did this. So one of the activities I wanted to do, but also good thing about Pool Everywhere is that you could integrate that into your PowerPoint. And I'm in fact using Google Slides. You could also download that extension and you could add it to the Google Slides in there. So that was actually a good one that I wanted to do, but it's okay, we could kind of move on to there. So kind of bring back to a little bit more about how active learning activities promote students' engagement in class. Kind of everybody will agree with this fact, is that it really give that classroom very interactive by students be engaging with not only content, but with their colleagues too, to really enjoy and really showing them in terms of how to be engaged with each other, and then how to be active in the class learning. And with a lot of panelists share about, it's very crucial. And by doing so, students will be used to that too. Another one is it break up your lecture time. If you're doing a lot of lecture, this is something that integrated, so that kind of because whenever for our online video production, we do share that don't do 1 hour long break, chunk it. This is another way to really chunking your lectures time too. So also that breaking time, you could utilize that breaking time as an active learning time to really revisit what they have just learned. So you could kind of do that part. Also, with that kind of activities, you could also gauge their understanding as an instructor to see where they're at. Also, the students who's participating, also gauging where my understanding, kind of going through that metacognition process, like, did I really understand? That really prompt them to really ask questions or do something about that. And lastly, it creates a safe space for all participants. That some, I know the introvert, extrovert, rather than students who raising their hand and answering a question, but really doing this kind of platform and engaging with this like Perusall, like a discussion board, Jamboard, everybody will get kind of some to say about it. So those are the things that the main point I would like to share with you. And some fun about the active learning doesn't really have to be always your content driven. It could be something to be fun about it, to get to know each other. So active learning to get to know each other in your class. So beginning, you could kind of create this as icebreaker. I love the way how, the poll everywhere could be really utilized, very fun to go do so. So, so that is something that I would like to mention. And I know I know some of you, as looking at your the polling that Megan did in the beginning, have asked about seeing that some of you are doing a Zoom synchronous meeting, online meeting with your students. Then how can I do this using in the synchronous platform? And I'm just gonna go over very quickly in terms of what are the tools that you can engage students with in Zoom. And I'm just kind of go over very quick. There are a few things that you could do, which is very simple. One is a non-verbal feedback, and we do have it, going through the participant. There's many things that they could do, raise your hand and so on. And there's some of the reaction tool. Some of the tools are actually improved. So now you could use emoji there. So that's something to find. So kind of share with that. But also chat and polling is a great to do. A chat, you could engage students by prompt a question and everybody answer through their chat they could do that, as well as you could utilize a polling, which actually Megan demonstrated in the beginning of our workshop. So that's something that you could do. A polling poll everywhere could also utilize it within using Zoom too. So another one that we would like to mention, which kind of, I'm not sure how many of you have used, is that Zoom also provides a whiteboard feature. And I know that Max shared about Jamboard. It's very similar, but I must say Jamboard is more intuitive in a way, but whiteboard in Zoom could also be used like that. You could enable this in the breakout room. Students could download what they have discussed and send it to you if you want to check it out or such a thing. So whiteboard can be used if you all have a lot of diagrams you would like to provide to kind of drawing and so. So that tool is also available. And then another tool that that I would like to mention is annotation. So annotation is something that it does require for you to enable in the back of your Zoom setting first to even have this feature available on your Zoom site. So annotation, one of the ways that I have seen faculty utilize that if they have, let's say, like hotspots, like images, and then you want students to kind of draw something on the image. This is something that you could do, as well as you could allow students to annotate through that. It's kind of draw and do it. So I know some of the anatomy professors have used this. Some of the music faculty have done so too. They have, what she did, she has a music notes up there, and then students to compose using the annotation tool. So that's something that is available through Zoom as well. And we all know breakout rooms, right? So we are soon going to be going to the breakout room, and the breakout room is something that, that you could now create in a 3 different way: automatically, manually, or let participant to choose. And that's the third option is the one that we are going to be doing in today's end of the workshop. So once you do that, then participant, each student or participant could get into to the room, or if you could send them to assigned room, or you can move them to manually there, and you could do a lot of settings to it. So breakout rooms are available for you to utilize to really to create that kind of a student collaborative and engaged environments there. Just to kind of share with you some of the tips and tricks in terms of if you do breakout room activity, you want to budget sufficient time to run that breakout room activity. So like going in and then out, and then while they're in the breakout room, what they need to be shared, as well as how long that you're gonna give them. So have that already kind of in your plan when you are thinking of, okay, you're gonna be utilizing the breakout room activity. Some of the things that share. Be clear in the purpose of what they are doing in that class, in that breakout room time. So kind of giving them a more very clear instruction, and then what the expectation of it. And then also give them a role. So make sure that you do have a roles of each students could take upon. One of them could be a note taker, facilitator, timekeeper, speaker, and so on. And then if you're using, let's say, Google Doc, Google Jamboard, or something to already to prepare before you you have actual breakout room activities. So kind of bring back to some of the tools that that we mentioned, but now the strategy that we mentioned the last time, some of the strategy you could utilize in your course here as well. So you could do the think, pay, share in your breakout room, or think, pay, share in your in-person role play, and then some of the tools that you use Canvas discussion, as well as some other tools that you have heard today. So you could kind of utilize, think about, I want to let you visit this site again, going to the digital active learning strategy to kind of see, and then and then we do mention what tools you could utilize to run this, some of the active learnings there. I would like to also introduce you that our department have been doing a lot of workshop regarding digital active learning, and focusing on some of the tools to share with you how to do so. And today, I know we do have a limited time. So if you were to really learn about some of the tools that you learn, we do have a website that created that is we share about past workshop, as well as because some of the site that we do share is we created a faculty instruction as well as a student instruction. And I know that some of the tool, not only faculty has to learn, but student has to learn to participate. So our department, we thought that, okay, creating a student instruction is always good to provide. And that's something that you could take it and then make it available if you're going to be using the particular tool in class. So that resource is available for you to access.